it over to whom, Roy or Lauren?
Well, I guess I could take the lead. Yeah,
I'm fine with it too.
yeah.
Lauren talk.
Okay. Well, you want to take the lead on the financial? You ready?
Okay, I'd like to call to order this workshop for
Okay.
today, today's date. Can't. What is today's date?
17.
Thank you. Today's date, August 17th, 2021. For the Commissioners Workshop dealing with budget. I do apologize not knowing the date. Anyhow, at this time, I'd like to entertain him. Since it's a workshop, I'll just entertain a motion to what is it?
Suspend Robert's
Suspend
rules.
Robert's
Make that
Rules of
motion.
Orders. Thank you. Anybody? Motion to suspend Robert's Rules of Order.
I would so move.
So moved by
I
Commissioner
already
Lloyd.
moved it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
All right. It was moved by Commissioner Shanefield, second by Commissioner Lloyd. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. I'll turn the floor over to Commissioner Shanefield.
So Commissioner Lloyd and I have been discussing how we would like to move forward with this budget workshop. And we think that the best way is starting off is to really get a roundtable discussion of the five of us and decide what our goals are, what our focuses are, and what, what we're really looking at doing for this upcoming budget season. I say budget season because it's all year round now, but for the next year's budget, so we can really ensure that we're on the same page before we start bringing people in and asking them questions and things like that. If we're not in agreement and we're not on the same page, that doesn't do a lot of good. So we are going to keep it with just the five of us today. Make a decision moving forward. And I do apologize, just so everybody knows, Mary, you weren't here, but I do have a meeting that I have to be on at 1:30. So I'll have to step out around that time,
We'll be finished by then.
hopefully.
Okay, very good. I think that's a good place to start because I believe every time we finish a budget season, we sit back and look at each other and say, well, I thought, or wasn't it this or wasn't it that? And we, I guess until now, haven't taken the time to really do this. So with that, I'll count on someone to take notes for us. And that, okay, we've got our clerk lane as well as anybody at the table. So let's just start it off. And who would like to start?
I think the first discussion, I mean, we've come up with the reserve discussion and decided on that 25 million. But I think that some of the other big looming things that we've appeared to have differences in opinion on, and that's not a bad thing. It's just something that I think we should discuss is, do we focus on core first? What are we looking at for the capital budget? What are we looking at for those outside entities and where we want them to be? I know there's been a lot of discussion from us as a whole as to some of the entities we believe can be standalone entities and potentially wouldn't need funding from us at all, but we can't just cut their funding off. And we also have to have those open, honest discussions with them. So I think that's probably a good place to start discussion wise.
Pick a topic. Let's just, are we all in agreement that the reserves, first of all, remain at 25 million
Yes.
as we had planned?
We'll need to have a discussion about the ARPA money as well, I guess. I mean, we have
Yeah.
20
Oh, yeah.
We're working towards 25 million, but we also have the ARPA money there as well.
Yeah.
What we're going to do with that.
Very good.
Not
And
today
I agree
necessarily.
with that ARPA money, Jeff, too. And I think maybe that could be a separate topic that, I've mentioned before, and in talking to Christina, that maybe we create a work group that really attacks that ARPA money and makes recommendations to us for a way to go with that ARPA money.
Well, let's do this. Reserves at 25 million. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, ARPA money. Roy just brought up a point regarding it. And He'd like to see a committee. Mary, you're out there. What's your
Yes.
thoughts?
Yes, it sounds good. I think we do need a committee for the ARPA money, but also for the other, if we're going to do grants or whatever to the outside entities.
Okay, that'll be for
Yeah.
another discussion,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Okay, let's just talk ARPA. Lauren? Still,
I guess, what are some of, because I know we had talked about potentially trying to hold on to some of that for some economic diversification, potentially Middle Baxter, but we also were, I mean, it's just sitting there right now.
Mhm.
So, I mean, what were some of the other options? I don't remember that we had discussed.
Well,
It's been a long time.
as far as discussion, I guess it's one thing, but the ARPA money has fairly wide.
Right.
We can use it for almost everything, not quite, but all the things that I've read and the NACOs I've attended. It can replenish lost revenue as long as we can prove it was lost revenue due to COVID. We
yeah,
can't put it into retirement accounts or things like that, but we can use it for lost revenue. And then once it's in a revenue account, we're welcome to spend it the way that we would like. It's
yeah,
good to
and
go.
it can't, I call them sideboards, Commissioner Smith. And I think one of the things that what I rely on is, I know Christina's following along with all those recommendations or possibilities that may come with that rescue money. And I, first of all, would like to, when it's settled, have her come in and say, here's our sideboards, can it be, what are the limitations to lost revenue? What are the limitations to everything else? And that type of thing. So I think Christina would play a role in that, in helping us determine the side edges. Now, going back to a committee, I will formally oppose any committee being set up that is going to determine how funding in this county is being spent, because I was elected to make those decisions. And when those committees are involved in that and they make the decision and they take that vote out of my hands, I'm going to, I guess, say I won't accept that. I think it's our responsibility as commissioners sitting at this bench to make those decisions. Yes, we could have a committee that maybe want to inform me as to what my decisions should lead, but I don't think I would stand still for a committee
I think
to,
it should just be recommendations.
yeah, I know they'd only be recommendations, but guess what? You put a committee together and you ask for recommendations and you don't follow them, then where are you?
True.
I think we as commissioners are elected to make those decisions for the county when those things are there. And if we make the wrong choices, then I guess we're all one vote away from, or one issue away from whether we sit in our chair again for another term. So I understand where Commissioner Lloyd's coming from, and I respect that thought. But again, too, I'm not going to have a committee take my responsibility to vote for this county out of my hands and that type of thing. I think that's our job, and I think we should do it, and we can come up with where that money should go and that type of thing based on the input from whomever it is we visit with. So, but I do believe the ARPA money is there for discussion and that type of thing. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know, Commissioner Smith, did you say anything about ARPA money yet?
I started it off, I think.
Okay, yeah. So that's just my thinking. I think we're a long way from that agreement. Mary, what about ARPA money?
Yeah, I totally concur with you on as far as the final decision making should lie with us.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, and I think my thought on the committee is we pay, and we have a great group of elected officials and also department heads that I think could help sift through that information and simply make recommendations to us and use their expertise to kind of have some ideas and directions to go, is what I'm saying, because that is a large chunk, and it could really make a lot of, really set the direction of this community and this county for a long time. And I think being able to bring in some of our knowledge base to help guide us in making some of those decisions is good, because I do agree that we were voted to make those big decisions. And if we could have some ideas and concepts from the people within that, I don't think that hurts our decision making whatsoever.
Well, if it's to get ideas, that's one thing, but to come forth and their job is to make recommendations, is their expectation that that I'm going to follow their recommendations. I couldn't do that because, again, I go back to my statement. If you look at people and say, hey, bring me your recommendations, and I bring them and they're not followed, then what good was it to put the committee together if I wasn't going to listen to them?
Well, it depends on what they present. If they present
Sure.
junk, then
Well-
yeah, we don't want to listen to them, but
Yeah, but
maybe
I,
they come up with some good ideas. I think that there need, there definitely needs to be some, I've tried to educate myself on it, on the ARPA money, because I think it's very important. And I know there's been some about hesitancy, but different ideas about where it should go and what we should do. And so I've tried to educate myself on what can be used for, but
Absolutely.
that doesn't mean that I have the best idea. And so I think tapping people, and maybe maybe we just ask opinions from our elected officials, or, where do you think that this money could be used best?
Okay.
With maybe a brief summary, 3-4 sentences of this is what it can be used for, or this is what it can't be used for.
let's do this. Let's let it think about the ARPA money for a bit, because I don't want to see the ARPA money take up the whole time and we don't get to anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think we should just, when should we decide on it? Let's set a deadline and move on to the next
Yeah.
item.
yeah, so I think the ARPA, personally, I think we could decide on it based on when we know what the true sideboards are that are set by the feds. And I think Christina would be able to provide that for us when as she knows what the edges are on the reports and that. Would that be fair?
Is she going to do that soon?
I wouldn't. Who's a grant liaison?
Mary and I.
Have you heard anything from her with regard to the sideboards being determined with the art rescue money?
I can follow up with her, Doc. I don't think she had everything 100% knowledgeable at this point. It was still working through things, but I don't want to speak out of turn, so I can reach out to her and ask her where she's at with that.
That sounds good. Is that all right, Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I feel as though the information is out there now. I've attended a NACO video conference. I've received email. There's a lot out there now saying, hey, this is how you can and can't spend the money. So I feel very confident the information's out there. I don't feel confident I have it all just because I haven't spent that much time doing it, but I feel as though it's out there. And so we need to know.
Well, maybe we
sideboards
could
sooner
ask
rather than
Christina to
later.
update us at their next meeting.
For sure.
Next meeting, Commissioner Lloyd? Yeah.
Yeah, I
what
can
do you
ask
say, Lauren?
Christina if she can present you.
That sounds good.
Yeah, next meeting. Okay. Sounds good. Going on.
So I think that we had discussed the, how we wanted to handle, and this is an idea that we came up with, that there would be the potential of handling outside entities from a grant application perspective. So, I know Commissioner Lloyd and I have talked widely about that, and I think Mary just brought that up as well. So I wanted input on everybody's idea around that, and then how we want to move forward with establishing what those guidelines look like and the application process and things like that. We have
Would-
plenty of time to do it now, but if we wait much longer, we're not going to.
No, okay. Comments, commissioners?
Yeah, I can. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
do I have to call you Mr. Chairman when we
We
suspended Robert?
suspended. Yeah, there you go.
So
I'll just make sure we don't talk over each
Yeah.
other, okay?
okay. I guess when we first started talking about the thoughts, the concept really came down to is, by statute, we're not required to pay for the outside entities, but there's definitely some of those entities that are highly needed in this community. But on the other hand, there's become some high level of codependence, and we don't always have that ability within the budgets. And the concept was maybe if we created a grant system and we could work with Christina on that, using some of the tripartite ranking stuff of that way we could determine, hey, this year we have X amount of dollars for outside agencies, and they can apply using this system, and we could create a formula to help determine need as a way to be able to still support those agencies, but be able to do it within our abilities and our funding abilities at that point, based upon our financials. Do you think that's a fair summary, Lauren?
I think it is. I think it's a great summary, and I think it would even out the process as well. Because I mean, we could always go in and say, I don't know, say three of us really like a certain program or project or whatever. That's not necessarily always what's best for the community, or even or equal or whatever. This helps even that out just a little bit. Not that we won't have the ability to make decisions based up on our opinions and things like that, but this just helps level the playing field, get all the information out there, ensure that we're receiving the same information from every entity, and also that we're holding them accountable for what they're saying they're going to be doing.
No, I like everything about it. And Mr. Commissioner Smith first, then I'll wait till last. I always do.
I like the philosophy very much. I'm sure there's a pitfall out there that we can't see yet, but it sure sounds good right now.
I know, right?
Yeah, it sure does.
I like it a lot, and that makes me worry. So I'm all for it right now. All in. Let's go.
Okay. Commissioner Toman?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Maybe Bonnie could start with helping us, because we already have a list of questions we ask those outside entities, and maybe she can help us make up a matrix, a score sheet or something that we could use. I worry about overburdening Christina. And if Bonnie could help us develop something, then Christina maybe could work with us to fine tune it.
I like the idea, but the thing that comes to my mind is if we're going to ask for them to write grants and start early in the process, I think some way and how we need to have established what that pot of money looks like, how much it'll be.
Well, I think if we put in this first year something about all of the money that is going to those entities currently, that's a start, or maybe 80% of it or whatever we feel like, but start with that. Okay, we've given these entities this much money in this budget year. Next year, we want to cut it by 25% or something. And so that's the available money out there. I don't know.
Well, the only thing I'm thinking about, and I like your idea, but what I'm thinking about is we still have that wide gap between revenue and expenses that we're trying to close down, and that type of money. So when we say how much they spent this year, reduced by a percentage, I think that would help close that gap. I think the other thing that may help us to determine what the true picture looks like would be is have we know, I know in conversations with Gary that he believes he can predict what personnel costs are in our budget by within 5%. I know, talking with Bonnie, she knows what the operations and maintenance are, probably on an average within 5%. The unknowns is the capital and the component units, and then the outside agencies. So therefore, if we know what our revenues possibly are, and we deduct the personnel and Bonnie's operations, that should leave us an idea of what the actuals are. But yet, when you look at the component units plus the outside agencies and capital, I mean, how much of that, what's left over from what Dave presents as where our revenue is going to be, And that gets divided up between capital component units, which are mandated by statute, and then outside agencies. Then that gives us an idea of what we need to put in for reserves. I'm just ballparking it,
Yeah.
commissioners,
Yeah.
to make that particular idea work, applying, in other words, using it as a grant program for money supporting themselves.
And
I mean, would that be a place to start?
It would be,
You don't think so, Lauren?
I don't think so, because in federal funding, just working through the YWCA, I mean, you kind of have a ballpark of what you got last year, but they come out last second and say, we don't know what your funds are going to look like until you get your funds, or until like we actually give you the grant award. I mean, I think that things change so much over a 2 or 3 year period of time. I think we can give a ballpark, but I don't think that's a place that we need to start or focus on now, because we're not going to know those numbers, and capital expenses are going to change annually, things like that. We're not going to know those numbers. I think that Jeff's idea, or maybe that was you that brought up, where they are now, we do know that we're going to have to continue to cut, but we don't know exactly what that looks like yet.
Yeah.
And we probably aren't going to until we get final numbers in. We aren't going to, I mean, if Natrium decides they're coming to Sweetwater County, that's going to be a different picture.
The picture. Okay, but we're in agreement that we want to, for the outside agencies,
yeah,
not the component units, look
not
at
the component
grant
units. Yeah.
approach this year.
Correct.
And with one thing too, I want to throw out, I do agree with that, and I can work on, I'd be glad, and I do think we can bring Bonnie into it. And I know Christina has a lot going on, but she already has kind of a template of where we can go with in a direction if we use the tripartite board model.
Yeah.
So we don't have to really create a whole new will. We can use that as a partial creation. And I also want to say, I think with the shift we made last year in the capital committee, where we currently have a list of capital projects that we know what we've spent this year, we know what we're using. We'll meet again soon where we see if there's any new projects. There is a little bit more predictability, I believe, in the capital projects, unless there's an emergency, because we'll be able to look at that list and say, right now, that list is 15 items long. And let's say we've gone through 7. Okay, so once they're done, we know we have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Which ones of these are priorities? So we actually have a little bit better mechanism to predict capital spending, I think, in the
Well,
future, based upon that capital group that we've
So-
created.
What I understand then that we could predict personnel,
Mhm,
we could predict operations,
mhm.
and now you're saying we can predict capital.
I think we could.
Okay, those 3 pieces become important for county operations. So you could take those 3 pieces minus the revenue and still have an idea of money, what's left over for component units and
Outside agencies.
state agencies. Is that a thought?
It is a thought too, and there is a little bit of flexibility in that capital 2 doc, where if we say, hey, these are the 6 projects we want to go over, so this is what the cost is going to be, and if we end up not having enough money, we could go back to 5 projects. So it does help predict, but have some flexibility.
So would it be beneficial for us to have maybe Mr. McLean and Miss Berry come before us and just kind of show us those predictable
Mhm. And we have-
arenas
And we have Gene be part of that
and
also.
Gene part of
with the
that for capital?
group.
Yes. Would the commission like to see what that may look like?
Gene and who? I'm sorry.
Gene, first of all, Dave.
Got
He-
Dave and Bonnie.
Dave, he can assess it, and then you have Bonnie for operations, Gary for personnel, and Gene for capital.
Okay.
And then we have an idea of what we may have, conservatively for money left over for component units and outside agencies. Lauren, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Mary, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that sounds like a
Okay,
start.
so we'll have Gary and that group get on the agenda and have hopefully a presentation that we can look at, okay? And then that'll help us move into that, applying for grants for outside agencies. Would you agree, commissioners?
I like it a lot. It's sounding even better now. It's good. Yeah, this is good.
Okay, we can, no, I like
Something's gonna totally go
everything that's
wrong.
come, but I think now what's key is our next steps, Lauren, would be then to begin to, as we bring the outside agencies in, what do we want to ask them? or I mean, not outside agencies, any of the outside agencies or components.
I don't think we should bring them in until they do the grant application.
Yeah, that's,
I-
that'll be in the application portion and we'll have to explain it to them,
Well,
but,
that would be for the outside agencies, but what about the component units
oh,
and
my opinion on that, Mr. Chairman, is that I think one of the advantages last year of some of us going and meeting with outside agencies and the component agencies to discuss their budget is what they gave us a more innate look, inside look of what they do and where they're at. I think if we were to start bringing the outside agencies in now, so not just one person is getting that innate look, all five of us are getting that innate look, helps us really have an understanding as we're looking in the future of budgeting to say, all right, this is what exactly they do. And as we're having to look at either cuts or reductions, what are the most important agencies out there and what are they doing that meets the mission we see as most important? So I think by having those conversations and meeting with the directors and their boards, it gives us all a better look of what those agencies do and how they fit into the bigger picture of what we should be funding. Does that make sense?
thoughts, Mary? Yeah, that makes sense. Thoughts on that, Mary?
I just don't want to have to invite them in twice. I think we should start with the core and the component, and then like in January, get the grant process out to them and then start bringing them in, because then they can explain their program and why it's important, but you're covering the grant process at the same time. So you're not just getting an overall view. I would just rather see us look at the departments and the electeds and look at our base operations and let them do their presentations, see where they could cut, and then go to those outside ones.
Yeah, and I would like to see the component units come in
I would.
ahead of also with the electeds and that, Mary. And
Yeah,
I can see the,
agree.
yeah. Okay, thank you. Jeff, your thoughts?
I agree. I think it'll be a much better process if we can do it that way, a little more orderly. I think the communication will be important. We got a little muddled in our communication last year. And so one solid message, and maybe that comes from the board of five all at the same time, and so, but I don't want to, same thing, we've had these marathons where we have 20 entities come in and
Oh.
talk to us, and
It's not
and I
effective.
tell you what, yeah, by the end of it, you're like, whatever, it's all hodgepodge and I've lost track. And so, 3 and 4, maybe 5 at these kind of meetings, I think is and brief, let's not make it 20-minute presentations each or anything like that. We need it brief, but I think if we also let them know, hey, this is what you're coming for, please bring us, you're selling yourself to us. You're selling why you want us to provide funding to you. And I think if we kind of turn it around that way, instead of just turning in the sheet and us saying, yay, nay, I like your name, I don't like your, whatever. I think it's been a little too hodgepodge. And so if we
Agree.
can make sure that we give them good direction, I think it can be really productive. If we don't give them good direction, then it'll turn into just more of the same.
Okay. I agree with that. I think bringing in the outside agencies starting in January would be very important with some direct questions, the same questions
Mhm.
that all of us are thinking. So that'll give us time to generate that. And I think then starting in our second meeting in September, we'll bring in the outside agencies. And do you want to do the department chairs?
Okay, say that again, because I heard outside agencies in January.
No,
and
no,
September.
no, component units,
component.
component units earlier.
Okay,
Outside agencies in January,
component units
component units and elected and
in September.
departments starting the second meeting in September.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah, I just worry if that's
too soon, too much.
I mean, too soon. I'm wondering what they're going to have to tell us in September of this year when they're 2 months into the
Well-
budget. But I don't know. I know we want to get started earlier, and I don't know if that's, is that
Well,
going to be worthwhile, Roy? do you think?
let's ask ourselves this question is, I know, well, Lauren's not here, but, we want to start it early. Outside agencies with the number that there are, it wouldn't hurt to start after the first of the year, but when would you like to start with the, or is there a need to start with the county core at all?
I think they have done an excellent job
Yes.
of playing along, and they get our message when we send out our message, no matter how late it is. They seem to understand and get that. I don't feel like that is as much of our issue as components and outside.
Okay.
That's
So
my opinion.
what's your thoughts, Mary? Core people pretty well have the message. That's your electeds and our departments.
I know it takes a lot of time, but it still seems like our departments and the electeds at least should come in and give us a heads up. Are you anticipating any changes, differences, or what's vital to your operation?
Could we do
We can
that?
do that, but I don't think we can do that in September.
Huh?
I don't think we can do that
No.
in September.
I think that might be a January question. What do you think, Mary?
Well, we won't have time to get them all done though, so I don't know when you want to start it.
Well,
You don't have
when
to
you-
give us their budget, but I thought it was helpful in that process last year. I met with the sheriff's department and there's a lot of idiosyncrasies there that we wouldn't realize. And Donna Lee Bobek, she kept coming in asking for more staff, but I think if we had the chance to listen, okay, over the years, I've cut my budget by 50%, whereas some other elected hasn't cut it at all. I mean, just some key little things that they might highlight. I don't know. We only have a limited amount of time. So I don't know how we get it all done. I don't know.
Yeah,
But I think it is important that we all hear from them, and maybe we have to develop some key questions we ask each one so it's consistent.
I feel as though of anybody, I think core, this is their job. They are county
Yeah.
employees. And so I trust the sheriff, Gene, whoever, to do their best with the budget and understand what we were asking of them. And I think that they've complied quite well in the, couple of years that I've been here. And so I worry less about them, but then I do these other entities, especially where, core, we're 100% funding,
Yeah.
while all these others, sometimes, the Southwest Counseling, even though it's a decent dollar amount from us, it's not quite a drop in the bucket, but it's maybe 4 or 5 drops in their bucket. They have massive amounts of funding elsewhere, not from us. And
Yeah.
so how much time or effort do they spend on talking to us, whatever? It's not as big a deal for them, I don't think. But then there's another entity out there that they're going to close their doors if they don't have our funding. So I think in their case, it's much more important for them to come and make a case. Whereas if we can convey a message to our core of, this is a tough year, do what you can and come to us with your explanations of why, I think that can be a little bit later in the year, because that's what they're doing every day. We see them all the time. We can communicate with them much more easily than we can a golden hour or whoever. So I trust them to do their job, and I don't know that we need to micromanage quite as much as we do with the others. If I'm saying that right.
Our core people have stepped up to the plate
Absolutely.
when we've asked them to, and when we've gone back to them, they've stepped up to the plate and haven't said much about it. So I think they have a better understanding. They don't have a sense of entitlement
Mhm.
to funding as much as the component units and outside agencies do. And I think that's where we got to get in and figure out, hey, where are they and can they get additional funding from somewheres, because the county cannot always be there, because some of that money we spend on them is very needed to come back to the county for capital as well as just for core operations. So you're not going to get it anyplace else. There's not going to be any new revenue. There's not going to be anything fantastic out there. And yet we're responsible to narrow that gap of between revenue and expenditures just in county core operations. And I agree with Jeff that the reserves do belong to the taxpayers, but those taxpayers expect us to have money available for road emergencies, for bridge emergencies, as well as for building emergencies as well. So we need to be somewhat protective of our reserves and that type of thing. So I'm pretty comfortable, Mary, with having some conversations with those core groups as meetings go on, bring a couple of them in, just see how things are going. But I think as I think of the process that we've done in the past, my thought is I agree with bringing in the outside agencies in January, and I'm not in favor of bringing them all in over 2 meetings like we have in the past. I think we can bring them in as less than that in a workshop setting of 4 or 5 or 6, whatever we feel comfortable with, over 4 or 5 meetings. And we can even have special meetings. The one thing we've stayed away from as commissioners for the most part has been special meetings, but we can have special meetings starting in January. And I will say this, but I hope you don't take me up on it, as often as you like, commissioners. So I don't think we have to worry about a time element. I think we can start after January. I believe, Mary, we can hit what you're thinking by just simply 1 or 2 simple questions. And if they're just, how's it going? What do you see your needs are going to be for this next year? And we jot them down and say thank you to the core government. But I think the questions might be a little differently even to the component units. And I see questions that would be differently to the airport than they might be to anybody else. I also would see where we would look at the Joint Waters Board and not even bring them in because they are self-funded. They don't ask us for any money. The only reason we want to have them come in is bring us up to date as to what their operations are about and that type of thing, because they are funded, I believe, through a tax assessment or a mill levy, if I'm not mistaken. So, and then that next brings us to the outside agencies, and we can meet as often as we want and have the questions we want answered, and actually dig into their budgets based on even I've still got everybody's paperwork on my computer from last year, and I don't think it'll change much other than dollars. But I mean, really get into where it needs to be with those component units that we highly fund, as well as those outside agencies and that type of thing. And there's a couple of other ones in there, but we'll get to those later. So what's your thoughts, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, Doc, just one thought I want to, before I'll hit outside agencies real quick, but in a sec, but I want to expand on what Jeff said about our core government too, is I actually believe our core government truly does understand. In fact, I believe they've taken more of the brunt of our cuts than some of our outside entities that aren't required. And at points, I think it's been a disservice to some of the county basic, like we haven't been able to give raises, bonuses to employees for 4 years. I think those are things we have to look at too. And so as far as the outside entities, I think it's important to be able to sit with, the directors, their board members, whoever wants to come and present, and get an intricate detailed look of what they do, what they offer, how many constituents they affect, what would happen if their services were lessened, or, what other funding options do they have? Because then as we make those tough decisions, we have a better educated group making those decisions on what is the most important functions out there, what are those entities doing, and where are they making the most effectiveness. And it will also help us figure out if there's any agencies or organizations then maybe you're duplicating services accidentally. So I think that's really integral information, especially with those outside entities to take a look at.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You know, I don't think the county, I don't think an outside entity should be entitled to a raise in the amount of dollars we've given them because they've chosen to go in and spend money in such a way that they can't, that they expand their budget and they go, well, the county's going to pick it up. So I agree with what you're saying. I think they need to understand. I think we need to know if they're given raises and where that money for raises is coming from. That's a good example, because anytime you get into personnel, we all know that budget piece is 80% of anybody's budget or more. And if they're increasing their budget by 85%, doesn't mean the county should have to pick up that extra 5%. That's not what our funding's for. It's for direct services, not for paying salaries for services. And I know some people construe that as all in the same. So are we, Mary, you pretty well in agreement with, we can start in January and be beginning to visit with component units and outside agencies?
Well, I would say outside agencies in January, but if we're going to start on budget, and I didn't mean to be saying that I wanted to hear all of the core. I just think they need to have an opportunity to share their uniqueness. Like the sheriff, he brings in extra money from housing prisoners, and how much is that money? I don't think we realize some of the little things that are in their departments that I just saw it as an informational piece, but it doesn't matter when we do that. So
No,
I
and-
kind of agree with Jeff and both of you that maybe we should start with the component units because they're like our second layer out, and
Yep.
and let's get some questions refined and let's start bringing them in so that we're not all jammed up in January, February, and March with all these budget meetings.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, when we brought in all those outside agencies, we waited until almost May,
Right.
wasn't it?
Well,
And we crammed them all in.
Mhm.
Am I
we did
correct?
our individual visits earlier, but I think we just need to pace it out so that we get everything covered in a reasonable manner without having to do endless.
Well, we
days
can,
on.
well, let's sit, it won't be hard to sit down and look at our number of meetings that we have allowed for budget and divide them up by the number of entities. And then we can also set some special meetings, Mary.
Okay,
You okay with that?
yeah, it sounds good.
And then we'll go from there. And I think once we get you back in the chambers where all five of us are here, including Lauren, we can tighten that down a little bit more and talk about questions, okay?
Okay,
Roy, you okay with that? Jeff?
I like it.
All right, so what else do we, need, philosophically? I hate to go into philosophically questions without all five of us here. and
I
that
would
type of
agree.
thing. So I think we could have a philosophical question of what do we feel? What is our philosophy about the budget? What do you think, commissioners, next time?
I would
Roy?
prefer, I think it's important to have all five of our voices if we start to really break down what is the most important, I think, and those philosophical questions of what agencies, what services are the most important, because I think those are all subjective matters. And I like when we sat here at the budget last time, it became very clear. I liked the Senior Citizen Center. Very clear. Lauren liked the YWCA. Very clear. Jeff liked, saw a lot of importance in the youth home. Mary saw a lot of importance in the 4-H. And it's one of those things in a subjective world that none of us were really wrong. We're right in our own way because they're all good organizations. So I think coming up with those type of agreements, you need all five because it depends on how you look through the glasses.
And there is a process I will share with you. There's a process that if the group of five of us want to determine what are the top 10 most important outside agent, not most important, but top in our minds agencies that should receive the funding. There's a way to do it, but the way you do it is also going to eliminate some of the ones that we feel are important to us. So it's a process you got to buy into, that you got to buy into the outcome without knowing what the outcome is. And it's an educational practice to determine what are your top 7, or, we use them to determine our top 7 goals or top 5 goals. But yet we had 12 to choose from. And the 12th goal that didn't make the list was probably really important to somebody, but it just didn't make the list. So we all lived with what were the top 5 in that arena for our building that year, or for our school improvement plan. So there is a process to get to that. I think Miss Lane's grinning back there. I think we could lead this commission group to it, but again, too, you have to buy into the outcome. You can't throw it out when you get there because you don't like the fact that your pet organization didn't make it to the top. So, but that's for another day. Should we attempt to carry on this conversation again at the second meeting in September and try and get some finer points as we move forward? Do you want to take some time to do that?
And I think we could actually even do that at our next meeting when we do strategic planning, and just kind of follow up from there, because it's one and the same.
I don't care. I'm just throwing it out there. And
Yeah, let's just move ahead to
see,
first.
well, let's do this. Let's see how, this might be, let's plan for it, but if strategic planning goes beyond and interferes, we can go to the next meeting with it. We'll
Perfect.
put it on the agenda for special meeting, strategic planning and budget conversation.
For the first one in September.
Yep, for the first one in September. And I believe the strategic planning, is that just for the 5 commissioners
That will be the 5 of us, really.
with
setting priorities.
open to YouTube or for public listening? And then the second agenda item was be to continue the budget conversation to hopefully narrow down what kind of questions and that type of thing, Mr. Lloyd,
Yes,
Commissioner Lloyd?
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
All righty. With that, is there anything more for this workshop, Mary?
Thank
Did
you.
have-
Just
You
wanted
okay
to-
with what I just said for the next
Yeah.
meeting, Mary?
Yes, sounds
All right.
good.
And you have anything more to say before we adjourn?
I don't, but you can hear me better on the phone than.
Oh, my
the-
God, it's night and day, Mary. It's like you're here.
Well, the county computer will not coordinate with my router, but the phone does, so.
All righty. Well, and it works well on the phone, because even when you hit the fact that when you go back to video, you can see yourself very well. We can see you very well on video. So everything works well, Mary, audio and video. Thank you. There
I
you
have
are.
else in the background for you.
Oh, yeah, I know it. It's awesome. Thank you. Okay, Lauren, just bring you up to speed. We're going to also at our next meeting at workshop, which is strategic planning. We'll also carry on the conversation if there's time for budget. But if there isn't, then we'll move budget to the next meeting. All righty, and that type of thing and that. So anything else to come before this workshop, Commissioner Lloyd?
No.
Commissioner Shanefield? Mr. Smith?
Was Roy talking to Christina, presenting at our next meeting?
Yeah, he's going to talk to Christina. Christina in
Already
here.
confirmed she'll be on
for
the
an
agenda the
update.
next meeting for ARPA.
Thank
And
you.
then Cindy, will you please talk with Gary McLean
And Dave and Bonnie.
and Bonnie and Jean, and let them know next week that I'll talk to them exactly about having them come on the agenda for a thing. Now, we got 3 weeks, don't we,
Mhm.
in between? All right, so it's a week from Tuesday where the agenda will be due. Okay, I'll talk with them how that'll look based on what we talked about here. Okay? All right, anything else, Commissioner Smith?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
All right. Workshop adjourned. Thank you, commissioners. Good job.
Thank you.
I feel adjourned.
Good timing, Lauren.
I came back right at the right time, guys. I'm good at that. I
I
usually
know.
show up when there's food or things are ending.